Good morning. Welcome to the Winter's Man, as we said, right? Daf Yomi, Chaf Hey, Amud Aleph, new Mishnah, and now we're going to get back into things. Here we go. Nishbach Adam al Ritzba v'asvu. If the blood from the animal fell onto the floor, right? It never made it into the service utensil. It's supposed to come out of the animal, go into the service utensil. Never made it, went straight onto the floor. So then v'asvo, even if you gather it up, puzzle, it is no good. Right, that's no good already. Says the Gemara Tana Rabbanan, and Rabbi said, "V'lakacha kohen hamashiach midam hapar." So they're supposed to. The pasuk says that the anointed kohen is supposed to take from the blood of the bull. This blood of the bull is going to be for again. We're talking about that's going to be the Yom Kippur offering, right? Or this case, sorry, this is going to be the bull of the kohen Mashiach, right? If the kohen Gadol makes a mistake, right? His korban chatas we said was a bull, so he is going to take from his bull, midam ha-nefesh, right? He's supposed to take from the blood of the soul of the cow, which is the blood that comes out right when you slaughter it. Velo midam ha-or, not from the blood that comes from puncturing the skin. Velo midam ha-tamtis, or what we call dam tamtis. Dam tamtis means flowing blood, the flowing blood that comes out. When the incision is initially made, the blood splurts out. That's dam ha-nefesh, that's the nefesh blood. That's the blood that you need. After that, the blood starts to flow more freely. That's dam tamtis. That blood is not supposed to be used for sprinkling on the mizbeach. It's a difference. So now,
when you do shechita, is it only the dam ha-nefesh you have to cover?
Yes. I'm going to say yes quickly, because we're going to see in further discussions, eating blood, right, the prohibition against drinking blood applies differently. It's a machlokas whether that applies to the dam tamtis or whether it's only dam ha-nefesh. So the short answer is probably an argument, because everything else about the blood is, and we'll probably get to it in chulin when we get there. So
the same for birds as well, or just
for birds is when you have to cover, right? There's the dam ha-nefesh which comes from birds, although it doesn't splurt out in the same kind of a way. Much less blood for birds. Okay, so now. Then it says, midam apar, dam mehapar yikablenu. Now, the next thing that they're going to learn from is the halach of the Mishnah. That's why we brought this in. That you have to take it from the blood of the bull, right? Meaning that the blood has to be taken directly from the bull, right? Not taking it from someplace else. Meaning, if it goes onto the floor, you cannot pick it back up. It's ruined. It's got to come right from the blood, from the bull. Because if you would have thought that the word midam, the pasuk which says that it has to come from the blood of the bull, and the simple explanation of it is midam afilu miktsas dam, that you only have to take some of the blood from the blood. That's what midam means. You have to take from the blood of the bull, and therefore the explanation of that phrase is some of the blood. You don't need all of the dam. You only need some of it. So V'Amar Rav, didn't Rav already say Hashochet tzarich shekabel es kol damo shel par? Rav holds that when you shecht an animal for the korban, you have to catch all of the blood. Shenemar, because the pasuk says ves kol dam hapar yishpoch. You have to sprinkle all of the blood into the of the mizbeach to the base of the mizbeach. Ella, so rather. Midam hapar. What does midam hapar mean? Dam mehapar yikablenu. It means dam mehapar, not midam hapar, but dam mehapar. We're moving the mem over. And that's a trick of drush that we're allowed to use. Rashi says, right? You can move the mem instead of from blood of the bull. We're changing it to blood from the bull. The kasavar. Gorin umosifin vidorshin, that we're allowed to do this. We're allowed to take a letter away from one part of the pasuk, move it over to another part of the pasuk. Obviously not by standard reading, but once the pasuk can't mean what you presume it means, then we have the ability to move these letters in ways that make the pasuk more understandable. Okay, there's lots of svarim written about how these drushos work, and it's going to be on the scope of this, but that is a great conversation to be able to have. Whether the rabbis are like, is it their perception? Do they have the understanding of the laws first, and then they go read the psukim, and then that gives them an idea? Because this drush seems to imply that, number one, we already sort of know what the halacha is, therefore we're kind of twisting the words in the pasuk to make it work out according to the way that we want it, or is there, like, is it just hard and fast rules being applied, and therefore we come out with all the laws? So lots of discussion, lots of arguments amongst the Rishonim how that all works. So shouldn't be astonished by this drush, even though it's unusual. Gufa, Okay, so now let's get back to this issue of Rav. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda said, Rav, Hashochet tzarich sheyakabel is called damol shel apar. When you do shchita, you got to catch all the blood from the bull. So, ve'as kol dam apar yish, as the pasuk says, right? Shenemar, ve'as kol dam apar yishboch. You have to spill all of the blood. Now, v'ha b'shirayim ksiv. But the Gemara says, well, wait a second. When we're spilling the blood, there is a concept of shirayim. Shirayim is once the blood has been sprinkled onto the mizbeach, there could be leftover blood in the basin, and that blood gets poured into the base of the mizbeach. There's an opening in the base of the mizbeach where we're going to pour the blood.
So the remnant goes into the base, basically.
The remnant goes into the base, but how can there be a remnant if you have to throw all the blood? So how do you explain it? So the answer is, Im eino inyan l'shirayim dehalese lekule dam. So he says you can't explain that this pasuk is discussing the leftover blood, right? Because after you have already thrown the blood, you have nothing left, right? Teneo inyan likabala. So therefore, we're gonna say that catching that you don't need to sprinkle all of the blood because there's leftovers and that gets poured away. What it means is you've got to catch all the blood, right? You've got to catch all the blood. Then once you catch everything, and it seems like this is a mitzvah, not la'akev, right? That's why you say, well, wait a second. What if you spill a little bit? What if you don't get a little bit? And we're going to also have Mishnayos later on. They're going to have cases where something went wrong with the blood that we got. And the Mishnah says, if you have more blood coming out of the animal, you can go back to the animal and get more. So the answer is, it's a lechatchila here.
What could be wrong with the blood? What could be?
We will wait and see. Right, we got 10 pages. We got to move. Okay, so there we go. So now, as far as catching the blood, though, that you got to do all of it. Sprinkling the blood does not have to be all of it. Amen. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Now Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. Interesting. Rav Yehuda is famously a student of both Rav and Shmuel. In the previous statement, he was quoting Rav. Now he's quoting Shmuel. Hashochet tzarich sheyagbia sakin lemala. When you are doing the shchita, you have to lift the knife up right after the shchita so that the blood falls off the knife into the utensil, right? You don't want the knife to just walk around with it dripping, right? You want it to drip, the blood to drip off into the utensil. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, "V'lakach midam hapar, v'lo midam hapar davar acher." Right? What you have to do is that you're supposed to take from the blood of the bull, right? Not that. Sorry, you're supposed to take the blood. I may have said that backwards. You are trying to hold the knife up so it won't drip into the utensil, right? You're trying to keep it from dripping into the utensil. Why? Because it says the blood is supposed to come from the animal into the utensil, not from the animal onto a knife and then into the utensil, right? So once it goes onto something else, that ruins it. So you don't want blood from any place else. You want the blood direct from the animal into the utensil. That's what he's learning. So the dam socket b'mai mikhanachle. So okay. So now what are you gonna? How do you clean the knife off? What's the proper procedure for cleaning this knife off? You're not gonna do it. So Rabbi bisfas mizrak. What you do is you wipe it on the outside of the container of the outside of the container, so the blood drips off on the outside. Kirichsev, as the pasuk says, kipure zahav. That kippur means to clean, right? Kapara, to clean, and that's in Sefer Ezra. And it says that these utensils were used for cleaning. So the knife gets wiped off on the top of, like scrape off on the out, so that drips down the outside, not into the inside. That's how you get the blood off the knife. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. Rav Chisda says in Rav Abba, shochet tzarich shegitain v'ridin l'tocha kli. When you're shechting, you've got to put the blood vessels, right? It's good we have a doctor, right, be able to tell us all of our
not a vet though.
Okay, but we presume there's a jugular vein and there's other things. You got to put them into the utensil, right, so that it goes direct from the neck of the animal right into the utensil that you're catching into it. Okay, so itmar nami, it has been said, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, vridin tzarich sheyiru avir kli. That the veins or the right have to be able to see the airspace of the utensil, meaning position the kli right underneath or right next to, so that way they're like right there in the kli. You're not don't hold the basin over here, right? Bring the basin really close when you do the shita.
It's the air of the kli.
Yes, that means you've got this big basin, right? This is the airspace inside of the utensil. Get the animal's neck right up against that space, right? So it's right there in that airspace, right? Don't leave it so that it's far away. Ba'amine Rav Asi me Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Asi asked Rabbi Yochanan, Haya mekabel, he's catching the blood, right? And he's holding the utensil properly, right, by the neck. Ve'nivchasu shulei mizrach ad shlegia dam la'avir. And there's a hole gets made in they discover a leak happens, right, at the bottom of the utensil before the blood gets to the inside of the utensil. So mahu, what becomes the rule? Now, we said that if the blood doesn't go into the utensil, so then you can't use that blood anymore. But if the blood goes into the utensil and then spills on the floor, you can gather that blood back up. So therefore, the critical question is the blood's here on the floor. But if it goes into the airspace of the utensil, you can get another utensil, pick the blood up, and continue the korban. If it's not considered in the airspace of the utensil, then it goes on the floor, then you can't fix this. What's the halacha here?
Is the second utensil, can it be any utensil? It has to be
A service utensil. Yeah. We're always going to use, unless otherwise described, we're going to use a clay kodesh of some kind, right? For Kabbalah. So, avir she'ein sofo lanuach kemunach dami, do we say that the airspace, when the blood is not going to eventually come to rest, is that still the airspace of the utensil? Because at the moment it was in the air, it was a utensil. And then, while it was in the air, before it rested, the utensil broke, and then the blood never rested. If it rested, we'd have no problem. But if it never went into the bowl, we'd also have no problem. It would be no good, right? But here it went in when it was a bowl. And then by the time it was going to come to the ground, the bowl was broken, and now it goes straight through. So is that work? Oh, lo kemunach dami. Do we consider it once it's in the airspace of the utensil as though it's now in the utensil and it's caught already, and it doesn't matter if it lands or not? So Amar Leis, Rabbi Yochanan says to Rav Asi, Tenisuha, we have learned this in a brisa. Chavis shemunachas tachas hazinuk. This I should have my, right, I think Art Scroll has a good picture, right? If I've got...
Art Scroll has them, yeah. Where's
right?
The water flow pipe or channel?
Yes.
Airspace with jug.
Right, this
off the cliff.
Correct. I've got a cliff, right? Mm-hmm. So he says that I've got, here's my my downward slope, right? And then I've got my channel here, this pipe, right? And the water is coming out, right? And this is my utensil underneath, right? That it's coming into. So this is my setup. Okay.
Probably the setup. Some of the water might drip onto the floor because
some of it's going to drip onto the floor. Some of it's going to go into the kli. That's fine. We're going to presume that's but we're worried. Mayim shebetocha ve'shebachutzala psulin. Right. The water. Right. So he says that the water that's in the barrel, that's outside of the barrel, right, which is, here's our airspace line, right? Our airspace goes up like this, right? And there's the water going down like this, okay? This is where our water is splashing here, right? Okay, good. Now, water that is inside the airspace, right, that is inside the utensil, and also shebechutzala, and also outside of the utensil, but in the airspace, psulin, they cannot be used for sprinkling the water for the paraduma, because that water cannot be drawn up in a utensil. It has to be mayim chayim. It has to be living spring water. So therefore, in this circumstance, right, this kli was just there catching water. Well, now it's in a kli. Once it's in a kli, it can't be mayim chayim anymore. So therefore, you're wondering, how do you get mayim chayim to the place?
That's what a mikvah is.
If I
that catches,
remember, this is not mikvah. This is for paraduma. Mayim chayim is required for paraduma. Right. But if I catch it directly, if I'm going to catch it directly into a kli for the sake of the paraduma, that's what I have to do. This is a circumstance where I've got the kli, it's catching water. Once it's in the kli, it's in a kli. It's she'uvim already. Now I cannot use it as mayim chayim for the paraduma.
So how do you collect the water then?
I think you can use a utensil if you're scooping it up for the paraduma. I'm not misunderstanding. It's just that this kli was not placed there for the purpose of paraduma. This kli happened to be
with the intention this is going to be used for the paraduma, then it becomes...
That's correct. That's how I understand it.
Or you look for spring.
No, look for it. That's what you need, right? Exactly.
The question, in the mikvah, when it collects, is that considered still mayim chayim within the mikvah? Because it is a kli.
Yes. As I said, if my kli is put there for the sake of gathering that up,
right,
then you'll be okay, right? This is a circumstance where I think this utensil was placed there, I guess, to collect drinking water or whatever, but now that it's in the collection, that water cannot be used.
Right.
Because it's already, if once it's filtered, it's
Right.
no longer good for this.
Well, once it's caught, not filtered, right? Once it's caught, then it's no good for this.
Are we talking about this water here is not for the purpose of para aduma?
This water is for, it's
I'm not
supposed to be.
saying, like you have a river or whatever where this water is coming from.
Yes.
So the rest of the water that's in there, we're saying is good for para
Correct.
aduma, but
Once it's caught, that's
over the
so now.
basin
That's the thing. Once it's in the utensil or over the utensil, in the airspace of the utensil. Okay. Now, sarif piha lezinuk. So mayim shebesocha psulin. So if he takes the opening of the barrel close to there's no airspace in between the pipe and the barrel, so now he brings it really close to the opening. Okay, so then it's going to be and it goes right into the utensil there. Psulin, v'shebechutza la ksherin. Then anything that's in the utensil is puzzle, but everything outside, which is still in the pipe and still flowing, that's okay, right? Because this is already separated. It's not in the airspace separate and disconnected, so that's going to be different. So now, Rabbi Yochanan is explaining that that this is the same sort of a thing with this airspace over this utensil. Despite the fact that the water has not come to rest in this container, the fact that it's in the airspace over the utensil makes it as though it is in the utensil. Therefore, same thing, the blood that is over the utensil, even if it hasn't rested in the utensil, is considered as though it's in the utensil, and therefore the blood is okay. Even if it spills on the floor, you can scoop it up. So Gemara wonders about this. Hi, Mai, what are you talking about? Boy, this is what we asked the question. Boy mine, didn't Rav Asi ask this question in the circumstance where the bottom of the utensil broke and it's avir she'ein sofa lanuach? It's airspace where the blood is never going to rest. The kapashet le avir she'sofa lanuach. In your case is where the water is going to rest, right? That of course this airspace is going to invalidate it because it's getting into a bucket that eventually is going to catch it. His question was because the base of the utensil, there's no bottom, it's not going to catch it. So, okay, so the answer is Tarti Kaboy Mine. Really, the answer is Rav Asi was asking Rabbi Yochanan two questions, right?
It said before, it said, Maim Shebesoicha Pasulin. The water within the airspace is puzzle.
Right. And Shebechutza is psulim.
Right.
Besocha and Shebechutza.
No, Shebechutza he said is kasherin.
Second case. First, that's the second case. The first case. The first case is what we're using.
Okay.
Right? The second case is where it's kosher because you brought the bucket right up against the utensil.
Right.
So when we say what's outside of it is what's coming up the mountain, as we said before, that what's coming out of the river is still fine. Right? Because we've changed what chutzah is.
It's outside of the tube.
Correct. Then we only have to worry about once it's outside of the tube. Okay. So now, but the point is, this is a different case. So we answer is no, because Rav Asi really was asking two questions, and he would say like this: Im timtza lomar. If you're going to say that over she'ein sofa lenuach lav kemunach dami, that even if the issue of the blood, there's no bottom to the utensil and it's not going to rest, and you're going to say that that's not considered resting. What about the airspace before it rests? What about that? So there's a second question. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan was using this brisa to answer. He's answering his second question, not his first question. So that's a good point. Okay. Rav Yosef Masni Hachi. Rav Yosef taught this back and forth between Rav Asi and Rabbi Yochanan, and therefore, according to this, there was no real answer to Rav Asi's second question, his initial question. Okay, there are those who learned the conversation between Rav Asi and Rabbi Yochanan differently. Rav Kahana Masni, right? That's how Rav Yosef learned it. Rav Kahana Masni, Rav Kahana learned it differently, and he says, Chavis boy mine. He asked the question of the container itself. Right? That he asked this upashut le chavis. He asked this question about this water. He actually asked the question about the water, and Rabbi Yochanan answered him. Here's a brisa that answers your question about the water. Rabba Masni, Rabba taught that the question was like this: Chavis boimine. He asked the question about water into the utensil. Upashut le mizrak, and he then answered him that the blood that goes into a utensil in the Beis Hamikdash is fine. So Ia Tamoda B'Mizrach, would you not, he would say to him, would you not agree that in the case of the blood that goes into goes into this container where the korban is shechted, She'i Efshar Lo below Zinuk, that there's no way for the blood to get from the animal to a service utensil without going through the airspace somewhat. In other words, you're doing shechita. We said you got to get the neck up close. But at the end of the day, the neck of the animal is not inside the bowl. Therefore, there must be some spurting of the blood into the container. And if the airspace is not considered in the utensil, then every time you do shechita, it's first going out of the airspace and then into the airspace, which we said was no good by the knife. So that would invalidate. So the answer must be that airspace is fine, right? That must be the answer. And that's how he answered it. Okay. Tanan Hassam. We learned in a Mishnah over in Meseches Para, since we love to talk about Paraduma, tell you a little bit more about Paraduma before we go on to our other favorite topic of Pigel in a moment. Right? Nason Yado O Raglo O Ale Yerakos. Let's say he diverts this water using his foot or his hand. He's trying to get this water now he's got it into a container that he really wants it to go into. Okay? So he's diverting this river into, and he uses some vegetation or some other kind of thing. Kadesh Yavru Hamayim Lechavis. Now he's trying to get it into the container. This is where we say the container is fine, right? He's getting it into the container that he's going to use to bring it to make the paraduma water. Okay, so now psulin, right? So that is no good. Cannot do that. However, ale kanim v'ale egozim, if he uses reeds or he uses leaves from nuts, so then kasherin, that's fine. Why? Ze'akal, here's the rule. Davar hamakabel tuma. If it's a kli or an item like hands or feet that can be makabel tuma, so then, or food even, that can accept tuma. Psulin, those are puzzle to use to divert the water. But davar sheino makabel tuma ksherin, you can use something that is not makabel tuma. You can use a leaf or a broken shard or something that you want to use, but it cannot be schach, right? Don't use a piece of bamboo, right? That's fine. You could do that, but you cannot use a utensil.
You could use evergreen, couldn't you?
An evergreen would be fine, right? Just don't use a utensil. Minani mili, what is the source for that law? Dam Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Yossi bar Abba. Rabbi Yochanan said, and Rabbi Yossi bar Abba, Amar Kra, comes from a pasuk, which talks about making a mikvah kosher. Ach mayanu bor mikveh mayim yiyat tahor. That a well and a cistern, which is filled with a collection of water, will be purification. Haviyasan al yedei taharat tehei, which in pasuk we can read it as the creation and establishment of these items must be through purity. Right? You cannot use something which can be mikabel tuma in order to establish a mikvah or a collection of tahor water. So that's one. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chia bar Abba says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Zoso Meres Avir Kli Kekli Dami. Okay, so now from the Mishnah, from this is the reason why we're bringing it, is that the airspace of the utensil is like the utensil because it went out into the airspace, right? Right. You otherwise. The only way to ruin this would be for you to scoop it up and put it into the utensil by hand, right? However, if you
channel it, you should be fine.
Airspace is anywhere above the cave, right?
Sorry?
Anything above the cave is considered.
Is considered the airspace. That's right.
If you channel it, would it be from you channeled it?
One, sorry?
If you channel it, would that make it? Channeling
is fine, right? That's what we're trying. We're going to channel without lifting it. Because what we're suggesting is that just by redirecting the water with something that's makabel tuma, and you're still going to have this shooting of water, that's considered to be lifting it and putting it into the container. Despite that, if I had lifted it up and then poured it back on the ground and it ran down the ground again, it would be mayim chayim. So therefore, the fact that it's spurting into the airspace is not reestablishing it as mayim chayim. Why? Because once it gets in the airspace, it's considered collected and in the utensil. That's why it helps us prove that airspace is like in the utensil. Okay, so the problem is, Amar le Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Zera says to Rabbi Chia bar Abba, V'dilma b'shoses. He says, maybe that there's no water shooting out. Maybe this is where he puts the utensil right where it runs right into, right? So So there's no proof from that. So Amar Le, he says, Tarda, you're a foolish one. You're a foolish person, right? They're a mixed up foolish person. Kedei sheyavru mayim lechavis tanan. The Mishnah says that you are directing it so that the water will go into the bucket, not that you're putting the bucket right directly into it. So therefore, the issue here is direction, and therefore you see clearly that the water is being directed through airspace into the utensil. Okay. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says in Rabbi Yochanan, Me'edus shel Rabbi Tzadok nishnas mishnazu, that with the testimony of Rabbi Tzadok, this Mishnah is stated. It's not, and the Mishnah says in Maseches Edius, Heyud Rabbi Tzadok al hazochelin. Rabbi Tzadok made the following testimony on the flowing water that's rolling down a stream on a mountain. Shekilchon bali egozen. That you're allowed to gather them up using the leaves from nuts, right? Shehein kshirin, that's fine. And that happened when they were making the mikvah in a place called Ohalio. The story came before the Chachamim, in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Sanhedrin, and they said that will work, actually not for mikvah, for mechatas. That was actually work for paraduma. It's just a direction with a non-holy service utensil, and that's what's fine. Okay. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Rebbe. So Reb Zera says the name of Rebbe. Hatzorim ozen hapar v'yachar kach kibel damo posel. Okay. You shech the animal, blood is coming out. What if, in between the shechting and when the blood is being collected, you put a mum on the animal? A blemish by nicking the animal's ear. That's the easiest blemish to make, right? You set the knife, you swing it out, you're not careful, you nick the animal's ear, and now what?
I'm saying not kosher, it's not good.
So you and Rabbi Zera, both in the name of Rebbe, puzzle. It's puzzle. That invalidates the korban because Shenamar, the pasuk says, "V'lakach midam hapar." This is the pasuk that we're using while we're bringing it here. This we're bringing the kohen is taking from the blood of the bull. Parsha hayakvar. It has to be a valid cow, just as it was before the shechita, right? Cannot have a mum. You can't put a mum on the animal before you catch the blood.
So we're talking about the time period where it's like
the moment
between the cut and the
that's correct.
Nothing's been caught yet.
Well, it seems like he's done shechita.
He's done shechita, but
because if you gave the animal a mum before shechita, for sure we know that's no good, right? That's a bal mum. This is a chiddush that even after shechita you could still make the animal a bal mum.
No,
right?
But we're saying 0 of the blood has been caught.
And 0 of the blood has been caught, right? Now the question really is how much of the blood has not been caught? Could it be like some of the blood was caught and now more blood is going to come in and it's going to postulate as a rove? I'm going to presume it's none of the blood is caught.
If they caught some of the blood,
yes,
it came from a valid animal at the time, and the essential service is the shechita, which was done properly.
Yes.
And the zrika, which can be done from blood that was valid.
So that's I'm supposing you're right. Let's see if the Gemara, it's a good diuk, and if the Gemara doesn't prove you wrong, I'm inclined to agree.
Right, but if no blood was caught, the animal got blemished, and then
it's no good. That's correct. Then they started. That's the case we're talking about. Correct. Now, as you say, it's like it must be moments. Like we're talking about half a second until the blood starts gushing out. Right.
But that's in the airspace.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. Yes.
So it should be considered, and it's also
it must not have come out yet of the animal somehow.
It's like when he's doing shechita,
it must be a second guy.
As the shechita
right?
finishes,
It's like JFK assassination here. There's a second.
It's like as the shechita finishes, it makes the animal remove the knife. Right. So it's like instantaneous.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. I view this more as like a theoretical question, right? In other words, I suppose because I don't think that the rest of the blood gets invalidated once into the utensil. I don't think so.
Similar to the previous question, really, where you have the thing and then the vessel breaks while
right. If it's but there the issue was
the vessel break is more of an issue because it's not a vessel, it's not a cleat.
That's the question. The rest of it. He's saying, so he's saying, but. The first blood, in that case, the first blood was fine because the vessel was there and then it broke. You can't say the same about the rest of the blood that keeps coming out. Then there's a utensil. If I've just got a utensil with a big hole in the bottom, for sure that's no good, right? It's only the first blood is his point, is even only the first blood was good. So therefore his point is he's proving that if the first blood is good and the rest of the blood is no good, it must be that the blood would be fine. So we have to be talking about where the mum happened before we even collected any of the blood. Okay. It's a good question how that exactly occurs. It would be very difficult for that situation to occur. Okay. So Ashkechan Koche Kochim, Koche Kalam Minolan. So if this pasuk, it says Midam Apar, right? They're catching it from the blood, then this pasuk is talking about Chatos. It's talking about a korban Chatos, which is Koche Kochim, we said. Those are the holiest of holy. So how do we know that this rule also applies to the lesser holy korbanos as well? So Amar Rava, Tanya Rava says we learned in a brisa by the Pesach, Korban Pesach, which is Koche Kalim. Set Tamim Zachar Ben Shana, right? Pasuk says that it has to be a sheep that's pure, male in its first year. So Sheyehi Tamim Uben Shana B'shas Shchita. It has to be pure, and it has to be a 1-year-old when you shecht it. B'Kabbalah, Beholacha, Bezrika Minayin. How do I know that it still has to be Tamim when I do the Kabbalah, the Holacha, and the Zrika? Which means that even if the nick comes afterwards now, I guess this is what we're saying. So I wouldn't take this back, right? You caught the blood, you nick the ear, it invalidates the blood that you already caught. That must be what we're saying. Good. So Talmud Lomar, therefore it says, Yihi yeh, it shall be. Kol haviosav lo yehu ela tam uben shana. The korban, the entirety of the service until the sprinkling of the blood must be done while the animal does not have a blemish, which obviously has got a gaping wound at its neck, which doesn't count. Other than that, Mrs. Kennedy, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play, right? Other than the big gaping wound at its neck, it cannot have a blemish. Okay. Esvei Abaye, so Abaye asked Rava about this. Rabbi Yeshua says, Kol Zevachim Sheba Torah Shenishtayer Mehen Kazayas Basar O Kazayas Chelev Zorek Es Hadam. He says, let's say you've got you misappropriate or make tamei the meat or flesh of a korban, right? So he says, as long as you've got a kazayas of meat left and a kazayas of chelev to burn on the mizbeach, either one, so you could still sprinkle the blood, and the blood is still fine. So he wants to understand, what did you do with the rest of it? How'd you get one kazayas of leftover meat without making a mum? Right? You would presume that somehow the whole rest of the animal got burned up, but one little piece got remaining, and yet we're still allowed to sprinkle the blood. I can't even put a nick in the ear. Somehow I got one piece of meat and I'm sprinkling the blood. So rather, Targuma, so he says you have to explain the brisa, is aben shana. The issue is not about mum. You don't need to worry about the mum all the way up until zrika. Right, and it's like we said, once you catch the blood, I guess you're moved on. He says, but we're worried about that it has to remain 1 year old throughout the entire process. That's the only issue. The mum, that doesn't issue. So now, how does the animal get to be 2 years old in the middle of the process? The whole process takes what? A few minutes, right? At best, it can't be done more than for the day. Right? So today's its birthday. So it is 1 year old all day. It can't become 2 today. So the answer is Amar Rava. Rava says, that actually, when it comes to birth dates of animals for 1 year, the hour of time that it was born matters. So therefore, if it was born at 1:30 in the afternoon, this animal is only valid up until 1:30 of the afternoon in its first year. Once it gets to 1:31, it's in its second year. According to this
process, it sounds like has to be.
And therefore, the whole process has to be completed before it gets to its second year.
Well, how long does the whole process take? I'm sure it takes a minute.
Right. Yeah. So hopefully it should be
Rika.
right. Very unusual. Right. This is all very unusual, but nevertheless, good to know.
Each card must have come with a birth certificate.
That's the thing, right? You got to know, right? The expiration date
And passports.
Yeah. So okay. Next.
If you designate an animal for a korban,
Yeah.
it goes past the year.
Yeah.
Like what?
Then you've got to sell it and use the money in order to purchase other korbanos with it, right? You got to let it get a blemish, sell it, and use it to purchase another korban. Can't use this animal.
Would tracking of hour that it's going to be practical.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But I suppose, yeah, so that's a good, I suppose you would know when its birthday is, maybe.
It says on your milk. What time of the day.
So you just ask the cow.
It says on the milk carton, right?
I'm not a cattle farmer.
Best before.
I just wonder about, how well the supply chain is.
Yeah, so I remember. I guess the answer is if you have 300 animals, but if you're a small farmer with 2 animals, you probably know and remember when it happened, right? So depends.
Figuring it out.
Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rami says in Rabbi Elazar, he b'fanim v'ragleha bachutz. Okay, good stuff now. Here we go. I get the animal, right? It's standing inside the azara, right? It needs to be shechted inside the azara, but the legs of the animal are outside the azara. The back half of the animal is outside. Okay, so what happens now? The blood of the animal that goes outside of the azara becomes invalid for service. So when you shecht, the blood comes out the neck. Where did the blood come from? Every part of the animal, including the back half of the animal. Therefore, you've got invalid blood in your bowl. You can't bring it. So what do? So chatach v'achar kach shachat kshira. If you cut the legs off and then you shecht it, then you're kosher. You're fine. Oh, there's your question. So you know where we're headed.
If you cut the legs off the animal, wouldn't that could be sort of blemished as well?
That's right. So good. Shachat v'achar kachatach psula. What are you talking about? If you cut the legs off and then you shech the animal, that's a puzzle animal. It's a balmum. So forget the yotze issue. You've got a balmum. So the answer is chatach v'achar kachachat sheira. So he says, if it's true that you cut off the legs and then you do shchita, it's kosher. Balmum kamakriv, you're bringing a balmum, right? So that's the shachar, right? If you do this, so the Mishnah said that. Sorry, if you cut the legs off and then you shchita, it's kosher. But if you do the shchita and afterwards you cut the legs off, it's puzzle.
Shouldn't it be opposite?
Should sound like at least the opposite, right? So now, Ella, so rather, we're going to change it. Chatach v'achar kach kibel, if you cut the legs off, right? And then you catch the blood, not the shchita, right? You did the shchita, it was a whole animal. So this must be saying, I did the shchita, then I cut the legs off, it's kshera. Now that seems to prove that what we were saying before about the nick in the ear cannot be a problem if you can cut the legs off, right? So v'achar kachatach psul, b'kibel v'achar kachatach psul. But if you caught the blood first and then you cut it, then it's possible because the blood comes from outside of the azara. Okay, so it's good to cut the legs off if you've got the animal inside. So basically you do the shchita and then quickly chop the legs off before the blood comes from the back half of the animal to the front.
Seems easier to just bring it in.
Animal, yeah. Must be crowded.
Yeah, why don't you bring it in?
How many climbs does it take to push an animal into the...
So the answer to those questions is it's very important to know what the invalidators are so that we can apply those cases to other circumstances that are more common, right?
We just read about, Shlomo Melech bringing like 1,000.
Yes, there you go. Possible that one.
Right.
Okay, chatach v'achar kach kibel kshera. Okay, the Gemara wants to know. Okay, you cut it off and then you catch the blood so that it's kosher. Now the ha'amar b'zeira hatzorim ozim bebechor v'achar kibel dam apostle. How do we make that work together with what Rabbi Zera said that if you nick the ear, you've got a blemish, you can't catch the blood. It has to be the same bull that it was before. So Amar Rav Chisda says Amar Avimi in the name of Avimi, that chotech be'ever ad shmagil etzem. You don't cut the whole leg off and create a mum. You have to do an incision to be able to separate the meat until you get to the bone by severing all the blood vessels that connect from the legs to the neck. The blood doesn't go there. But apparently, that's not a mum. Why is that a mum? Great question. So I'm not 100% up to my speed on mumim. There's those who say that this is a mum over, that it could heal, that it was not permanent damage or whatever it is. I don't know, but it seems if you cut it all the way down to the bone.
Is there a step that talks about
yes.
more details about movement?
Yes, we will get to. Well, I mean, here we're going to have some with Zevachim, and then we'll talk about trefus and things like that when we get to chulin. But
it's interesting because if you put a needle in, I know, like straight into the lungs, and you
puncture the lungs,
right,
is a trefa.
Puncture straight, right, but it could heal.
Not a mum. There's not a trefa issue, right?
Oh,
because you put a needle
it's
to
not
you put a needle to the lung, you're putting drugs in the lung, which make it trafe.
A treif animal is also not kosher to bring.
right.
Kibel the achar kachatoch psula. Okay, so now, let's deal with this issue, right? We said that if you catch the blood and then you cut the legs off, now it's puzzle. Why? So shamas minei, we're going to learn from there that dam hamuvla be'evarim damhu. Blood that is mixed into the limbs is blood, right? Otherwise, the fact that it spurts out, who cares? It's not really the blood.
Whether it's natural blood or not,
It's blood. So now, so the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. We don't necessarily want to prove that blood is considered blood. Really what's going, maybe Dilma Mishum Shamnunis. Maybe the issue is that it has a halacha of meat. Meat that is also outside, meat that goes chutz lazar, meat that goes outside of the temple area, also can invalidate a korban. And if that now meat gets mixed into the blood that's in the utensil, it's also going to invalidate it. So it may not prove anything about our ongoing question that we mentioned earlier at the beginning of this year about the blood being real blood or dam tamsis or whatever kind of blood it was. Okay, so now, shmas mina, well, if that's true, so then basar kachim kalim sheyatzu lifnei zrikas dam pasal. That means that the meat of kache kalim, right, because we said that this could even be a korban pesach, that leaves the azara, leaves the azara before the sprinkling of the blood becomes pasal. Well, I mean, that's a big thing because remember, the meat of kache kalim, meat of these animals can be brought outside of the azar to be eaten. I understand that the meat of a korban chatas has to be eaten in the Beis HaMikdash, so that doesn't go out. But now you're suggesting that I cannot bring the meat of a korban kache kalim outside of the azara before the sprinkling of the blood? So, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe Dilma, maybe what Rabbi Elazar is saying this is b'kache kachim. Maybe he's talking about kache kachim. Maybe he's not talking about kache kalim. Okay, so fine. We're going to try to bring another brisa, right? That the meat of kache kalim that goes out of the azara that ruins the korban before zrika. Tana Rabbanan Rabbi Zern, kache kachim shchitasam b'tzvam. Right? When it comes to kache kachim, we know we have to slaughter it on the north side of the mizbeach. We've said this before. Okay, it's good to say it a bunch of times. Remember by korbanos. Now we're going to get. These are the things I said. These are the rules. We're going to remember these rules because we see it 100 times. Right? I shecht my kache kachim. First, before you walked into this mizbeach, you didn't know what kache kachim were. Now you know they have to be shechted on the north side of the mizbeach. So that's great.
This is a karbanos before Pesukei Zimra.
That's right. Yes. So there you go. Right. Oh, that's right. Kache kachim shchitos b'tzfon kibul daman b'chli sharis. You have to catch the blood in a service utensil. Now you will always see these korbanos and understand what's going on there. B'tzfon, and it has to be caught. The blood has to be caught in the north side. Amad bidrom v'hoshit yodel tzfon. Let's say the Kohen stands on the south side. Right. The Beis HaMikdash is right. He's got his. We've got our picture of our Beis HaMikdash like this, right? This is our Beis HaMikdash model, right? And here's our Mizbeach here, okay, with the ramp, okay? This is our north-south line, okay? So he's standing on this side, and he sticks his hands, reaches over the line into the north side, okay? So now, if he does that, Amad bidrom v'hoshit yado l'tzfon, and he sticks his hands into the north, v'shachat, and he does the shchita, but the shchita is done on the north side. Shchita sokshir is shchita is kosher. It doesn't matter where he's standing; it matters where the shchita is done. The shchita is done on the north side, so it's fine. Kibel, but if he catches the blood that way, kabbalah sapsula. Now the kabbalah is no good because it matters the avoda. Remember that the shchita can be done by a zar, even a non-kohen. The person who's doing the shchita is not relevant. But the person who's doing the Kabbalah is very relevant, so where he's standing makes a difference. Hichnis rosho verubo. Now, how much of him has to be in the north side? If he put most of his body, rosho verubo, like by sukkah, right? Kilu nichnas kulu, it's like he's standing in the north side, and that's fine. Pirkisa, v'yatasa lidarom, chazra, kshera. Okay, the animal convulses during the shechita. And it puts part of its body outside to the south, right? They must have done the animals like right there on the line. The animal convulses, pushes itself outside, but then goes back into the north side. Then it's kosher. Okay, now, kache kalim. When it comes to those kache kalim, I want to put lesser kachim, right? The lighter kachim. This is a good translation. Shchitason bifnim. They have to be shechted anywhere inside the azara. Doesn't have to be on the north side. Anywhere in the azara. Kibul daman beklisharis, you have to catch their blood in a utensil. Bifnim, inside of the azara also. Amad bachutz, now if you're standing outside of the azara, right? By that Nicanor gate, you're outside there. Ve'echnis yodo lifnim, and you stick your hands in. V'shachat shchita so kshera, your shchita is kosher. Kibel kabbalah so psula. If you do kabbalah that way, you're puzzle. Same idea. Hichnis rosho verubo. If he sticks his head and his body in, kilu lo nichnas. That's like he's not inside. That's the difference. Right, that does not count. Right, cannot catch the blood that way.
Body has to be
right. And pure kasa, if the animal moves, v'yatzel chutz and goes outside, chazra, and then it goes back in, psula, it is pasul, which is the point we wanted to make. The meat of the animal of kachei kalim go outside of the azara, it invalidates the animal. That's our key point, right? Shma mina. That is our proof. We see from here, basar kachim kalim sheyatzel lifnei zrikas damim, that the meat of the kachei kalim that leaves the azara before you catch the blood is pasul. That is ruined. You cannot eat it. It's a pasul animal, and right, can't do it. Okay, so now Dilma. Well, maybe what the Bryce is talking about is be'alya v'yoter sakavedu shtei klayos. Right? Maybe what's going on here, that what part left the when the animal convulsed, what part of the animal left the area? We're talking about the tail. We're talking about the fats that are on the liver. We're talking about the kidneys. Those parts of the animal are supposed to be burned on the mizbeach. That's different than the rest of the meat. The rest of the meat is going to eventually be eaten outside of the azara. So it's a little surprising that before zrika, leaving the azara is going to invalidate it. When after zrika, you could bring it anywhere you want. So therefore, if it's talking about that the animal convulsed and the kidneys of the animal left the area, well, that makes some sense because those kidneys are never leaving the azara. Those kidneys are going on the mizbeach. So maybe that makes some sense.
The tail is if the tail is one of those, it's the back.
The fatty. So that makes but that makes good sense, right? Because then when the animal was lying down, like just the very end of the animal convulsed out of the area, so that would invalidate it. So that's good. So now, boy minei avua de Shmuel mishmuel. So Shmuel's father asked Shmuel the following setup questions, right? He's saying, He bifnim v'raglea b'chutz. Okay, let's say you've got an animal, the korban, right? It is inside of the azara, and its legs are outside, right? And you're doing the shechita. Mahu, what is the halacha in that case, right? He wants to know, is it kosher lechatchila? That's what he wants to know, not b'diavad or whatever. Kosher lechatchila or not? Amar lei, so Shmuel says, ksiv, it's a pasuk, v'heviyum la'Hashem. You're supposed to bring the animal to Hashem, right? Ashe kulifnim, right? That means that lechatchila, the animal needs to be inside, right? It's not a b'diavad question, but lechatchila, it has to be inside. So, okay, so his father asked him, Tala the shachat mahu. What if he takes the animal and he suspends it in midair, right? He's got a pulley system, right? The animal is midair and he does shchita while the animal is dangling, right? I've seen that in slaughterhouses actually, where they have like this machine that flips the animal upside down and makes it easier to shecht, right? So he's got this machine. The machine takes the animal, flips it upside down. The kohanim, he's doing this.
What,
right?
was this when you were working as a mishgiach?
No, I saw this on a video. PETA was circulating a video to show how terrible shchita was, and I watched it and I went, "That's actually not so bad." I mean, I understand, but the animal is being shechted, and so if you're trying to access the neck, I get it, but there are worse ways to kill animals, I would suppose. But anyway,
Look, the Muslims do worse than us.
He used to say Michael Vick, right? So anyway, people have to go back in history. Okay, anyway, Amar Le, you have to Google that one. Anyway, don't Google that one. Okay, yes, he was. He got in trouble for hanging his dogs up or whatever. I was like, yes, he was. That's right. And everybody, he was Atlanta, right? Dog fighting. It was like a lot of things. Anyway, Mahu. So what's the halacha there? Amar Lake Sheri says it's kosher, right? Because the airspace of the azara is just like the azara. So when the animal's inside the azara, no problem. Amar Le, he says, Ishtabasht, you've made a mistake. These are setup questions, right? You've made a mistake. Ba'inan shchita al yerech and leka. It says that, the pasuk says that the shchita has to be on the side of the mizbeach, right? And if it's hanging in midair, that does not qualify as on the side of the mizbeach. It's in the airspace of the azara, but it doesn't qualify as by the side of the mizbeach. Okay, now he asks the question, Nitla. So he took this animal that was shechted in the airspace, shachat. Okay, he hangs this up, and while it's in the airspace, he shechts it. Okay, 1 second. No, sorry. The person who's shechting it is hanging in the airspace now. Now he's trapeze, right? So he's hanging in the air and he's doing shchita on the animals that are on the ground. Mahu, what is the halakha there? Amar lei psula, he says, well, that's puzzle, right? Because you just told me I am not going to fall for this one twice. Hanging it in the air doesn't count, right? So Amar lei ishtabash, that's a mistake. He says, shchita al yerech v'lo shochet al yerech. The animal has to be in position, not the person who's doing the shechting, like we learned in the Brisa. He's on the south side, it doesn't matter, right? The person who's doing the shchita doesn't have to be in position. So, okay, good. So he goes on, more setup questions. This is what dads are for. Nutla, right? You think you know the Mishnah, right? Nutla, okay, so the Kohen is now hanging in midair in the Azara, v'kibel, and he catches the blood. Amar le, so he says now, right? So Shmuel says, Kshera, that I know, that's okay, right? He says, because he just told me, right, that it's okay that he could do shchita hanging, so he could do Kabbalah hanging. So Amar le, he said, no, ishtabash, that's a mistake. Ein derech sherus bekach, you can't serve hanging in midair, right? You have to be on the floor of the Azara, right, in order to be serving, right? Brian was on that one. Okay, good. Tala, he hangs him in, now he hangs the korban in midair, okay? And now the Kohen is standing on the ground, V'kibel, he catches the blood. What happens there? Amar lei psula, he says, you just told me, right? So that's for short pasul, right? The animal during shchita had to be on the ground, the Kohen has to be on the ground. This is for short pasul. Amar lei ishtabash? Nope. That's a mistake because shchita al yerech velo kabbalah al yerech. Only shchita has to be in the air on the ground there. The kabbalah, the animal does not need to be on the ground for kabbalah. It's a matter of only the Kohen has to be doing it.
Circus?
Okay, so
It's a banana ball.
okay, so now there's a machlokes amoraim about some of these questions. Though Amar Abaye says not so simple. Amar Abaye bekoche kodshim, right? When it comes to koche kodshim, he says that kulan psulos. Okay, if he hangs the korban up, if the Kohen is hanging up, all of those are puzzle. That's no good, right? If all the shchitos and the kabbalas in those matters are all puzzle. Bar mi nitla v'shachat, except for the circumstance where the person who's doing the shechting is in midair, right? Because the shechting person doesn't matter, right? He can be midair, but in all the other cases, everybody's got to be on the ground. And he basically is disagreeing at the idea that the animal can be in midair while the Kohen is doing Kabbalah.
Let's agree to disagree.
Okay, so that's where they're disagreeing. So now, Bekodshim Kalin, but when you come to Kodshei Kalim, though, Kulan Kshirus, all of these are fine, right? Because you don't need north side, you don't need Yarech HaMizbeach, none of that stuff is necessary, it just has to be in the Azara, so therefore it's all fine. The only thing that's not fine is Bar Min Not Lab V'Kibel. You can't have the Kohen suspended because the Kohen has to be on the ground, otherwise it's a chatzitza, an airspace, it's going to break his contact with the ground. That's the one that's not going to be good, but otherwise you're in the Azara, it's going to be fine. Amar Rava says, Maishna Tala V'Kibel Bekodshim Kalim, Kshera. Why is it that you're saying that if you hang the korban by Kodshei Kalim, that the Kabbalah is fine? Why? Davar Pnim Kibifnim Dami. Rava says, because you're saying the airspace is like inside. So therefore, Bekodshei Kodshim Nami, Avir Tzifon Kitzfon Dami. Why isn't the airspace also like north? Why does that make a difference? Elamar Rava says, no, I'll tell you what I think the halacha is. Bein bekodshei kodshim, bein bekodshei kalim. Doesn't matter whether kodshei kodshim or kodshei kalim. Ksheros, all of these are fine. Bar min tola v'shachat, except for the circumstance where the korban is hanging during shchita, bekodshei kodshim in the case of kodshei kodshim, because there the pasuk specifically says al yerech mizbeach.
So going back, why at that point would it be a problem to take the meat out? Because it sounds like it doesn't matter specifically where the
meat outside, remember, is going to be outside of the airspace of the Azara altogether. It's not just off the ground, it's outside. That outside is worse than an airspace for sure, according to everybody.
Right. Okay.
Nitla v'kibel, bein bekodshei kodshim, bein bekodshei kalim. So, if that's going to be invalidated if he is hanging, if the Kohen is hanging and catching them, because we know that has to be an avodah, he has to be on the ground, whether it's kodshei kodshim, kodshei kalim. Okay, so now, boy minei Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zera the question: Hu bifnim v'tzitzaso bachutz mahu? What if, right, this person is inside the Azara, okay, like this person is doing the avodah, he's got to be inside the azara, but his hair is outside the azara. Does that matter? Right? He can't have too long hair because he's a kohen. We say he had to cut his hair outside. But right, he's doing this. Right, his hair is sticking outside. So Amar Lei. So Reb Zera said, "Lav amart veheviyum la Hashem." Didn't you say that he has to be brought to Hashem? Right? Ad shetavokula lifnim, which means that. That he has to, the animal has to be brought before Hashem. Achtiv kulifnim has to be brought entirely Hashem. Hachanami. So this is the case also by the person. Bevoam el oham moed. These kohanim are going to the Beis Hamikdash. Achiv kulu lo moed. His entire body, right? It's not just most. That's the point. Not most of your body. That explains the brisa why when it came to shchit, when it came to the rosho verubo, when he was outside the azara, why that didn't count. That doesn't count because rosho verubo is not what we need. We need rosho verubo by tzafon, by north side. But when we're talking about coming into the Beis Hamikdash, that your entire body, even your hair, has got to be inside. Okay, let's at least try to turn the page for the sake of making we do 1.5. So we'll continue on. Says the Mishnah. Nosno al gabe hakevesh. Okay, they're supposed to sprinkle the blood of the animals that you've collected now onto the mizbeach in various ways. He didn't. He sprinkled it onto the ramp. Okay, or shelo keneged hayesod. He sprinkles the blood not where the mizbeach, not where the altar has its base. Is there a picture here? Even if there's a picture. Yeah, it will be good. Well, these are not great pictures. So
An illustration of the...
of the mizbeach. Perfect. Okay. This is what we're looking for, okay?
So she did it by the horn of the mizbeach.
Well, there's no base. We're going to see that there's the mizbeach. We need a good overhead. They actually keep showing it in the same angle, which is not the angle that I want.
Overhead picture of the Mishkan?
I'll show you the angle, but you're gonna have to take my word on what's not shown here, right? Here is this base, right? You've got 3 tiers. This widest part on the bottom, next part, and then the thinnest part. Okay, this base does not go all the way around 4 sides of the mizbeach. It only covers here, goes 1 amma around the corner, goes all the way around the west side, all the way around the north side, and then 1 little corner on the northeast side. The other side of the mizbeach has no base. So you're supposed to sprinkle the blood on these corners where the base is. Okay? What if he sprinkles where there's no base? Okay? So he's sprinkling this, basically the point of this mission is he's sprinkling all in the wrong place. Nosan es hanitonin lemata lemala, the es hanitonin lemala lemata. Or he's got blood that's supposed to be sprinkled above the red line, and he puts it below the red line, or that which is below the red line above the hanitnin b'chutz bifnim, and the es hanitonim bifnim b'chutz. He takes the blood that's supposed to be sprinkled inside the Beis Hamikdash on those korbanos, and he sprinkles it on the mizbeach outside. And the ones that are supposed to be sprinkled outside, he sprinkles on the inside. Puzzle that invalidates the korban, ve'inbo kares, but there's no kares if somebody then eats the meat of that korban afterwards. Now we're going to discuss what's going on with that when we pick up tomorrow.
All right.